On this occasion, the man in charge was Inspector George Feltham, a member of the Bow Street Horse Patrol, which had recently been handed over to the new police. As for Pegler, he had joined in September 1830, had resigned in April 1834, then rejoined 7 months later. A common pattern. Life in the new police was hard, but it could be harder outside. Given that forensic science was then practically non-existent, no blood grouping, DNA or fingerprinting, and Feltham's detection experience limited, he must have viewed the challenge with some trepidation. Today, an unidentified body still poses some unsolvable problems, even if the head is still attached. The surgeon did his best to help find clues, coming up with the interesting, but at this stage not terribly useful, that the victim had not been a virgin and had an unusual interior malformation, which would make it impossible for her to have a child. Inspector Feltham questioned the man who had discovered the sack, and then the 3 policemen. Clearly Pegler had given the matter some thought, indicating he had an inquiring mind. So, even though the body had not been found on his division, he was assigned to aid Inspector Feltham on this inquiry. The news of the finding of the torso spread with alarming rapidity. Already large crowds had gathered outside the workhouse and the building site, but spreading the news to those who needed to know it quickly, the rest of the force, was another matter. No telephone, telegraph, radio or email, and the penny post had not yet been introduced. What the police did have was their route paper system, by which details of latest unsolved crimes and suspects could be passed on to the surrounding divisions, who passed them on again like the ripples of a stone thrown into a pool. The system was quite efficient in its way, but of course the big problem was keeping the information up to date. Despite this news spreading, the investigation got nowhere until, 10 days after the torso had been found, Inspector Feltham received a message from police in distant Stepney in London's East End. They had, they said, something which might interest him. A head. A local lockkeeper on the Regent's Canal, which wound its way across North London, had found it difficult to close one of the sluice gates. He realised that some object was wedged there, and set about retrieving it with a hitcher or boat hook. The object proved to be the head of a woman, of about 40 to 50 years of age. It had clearly been removed from the body with a saw. Her right eye had been knocked out and her jawbone broken. The ever-resourceful Pegler, who was given the job of carrying this head back to T Division in a basket, now suggested that the murderer must have carried the body parts in the old chaise cart, dropping them off whenever he found a suitable spot. Feltham pointed out that the distance between the 2 spots was 7 miles, and that there must have been somewhere suitable nearer to the Edgware Road than Stepney. Undaunted, Pegler replied that maybe the head had been dropped into the Regent's Canal as the cart crossed under the Edgware Road at Maida Hill, and had there been caught up on a barge and dragged down to Stepney. In consequence, several men spent several days dragging the canal in the hope of finding the legs as well, but with no luck. The head proved to have severe bruising over one eye, probably occurring during life, and a torn earlobe. However, even this discovery failed to answer the most pressing question. Who was she? To help identify her, the head was preserved in spirits and put on display where members of the public who could claim good reason to do so were allowed to view it. Many did, most probably out of morbid curiosity. Despite the reported unceasing exertions of Inspector Feltham and Constable Pegler, the case went cold again until 2 months later, an ostler cutting willow canes on the side of a water-filled ditch in Camberwell spotted a large half-submerged sack. Inside were a pair of legs, which turned out to fit the trunk. The fact that Camberwell was a long way south of the Edgware Road and on the other side of the River Thames rather knocked on the head Pegler's idea that the Regent's Canal had been the murderer's dumping ground. But at least he had had an idea, and its pursuit had helped the police appear unceasing in their endeavours to catch the perpetrators of the Edgware Road murder. Very important when they were constantly ridiculed by the press and adversely compared to the Bow Street runners, who were still operating, and many of whom had the press in their pockets. The placement of the body parts certainly defied any obvious reasoning, particularly at a time when the means of transport was so limited.